Hello, my name is Elowen, and if you think family is supposed to protect you, then maybe you've never met mine. They told me I'd be honored at a charity gala. What they really did was hand me a dress so sheer under lights I might as well have walked on stage naked, and while they laughed behind wine glasses, cameras rolled. But what they didn't know was that my billionaire father was watching. They thought they'd break me. Instead, they woke up the part of me they should have feared all along. How does a family go from Sunday brunches to public humiliation? How do in-laws become enemies so quietly, so cruelly? And how do you fight back when they hold all the power? Let me show you. I should have known when they sat me next to the restroom that I was never part of the family. The vanity mirror in the hallway flickered fragmented lights across my reflection as I stepped into the banquet hall, adjusting the strap of my dress. I held my breath, tasting spring air and fragrant blossoms from the entryway. Charleston warms up this time of year, magnolia scent carried in the breeze, but my heart thumped cold with dread. I carried hopes that tonight I might belong. They assigned me my seat before I realized the pattern. It was the last row by the restroom, beside the busboy's station. A name card was placed before me. Elowen, misspelled. No E at the end. I glanced up. Callista and family laughing over glasses of champagne, radiant in silks, pearls, perfectly coiffed. My husband, Isolde, stands beside his mother, Cressida, nodding, smiling. My end of the table is dim, staff passing, cleaning, people rushing to restrooms. I straighten my spine, telling myself this is temporary. As the chatter rises, I try to lean in, to comment about the dress I wore or the table arrangements. My voice nearly rises above the murmur. But one guest glances over, pauses, then turns away. Another, a cousin of Callista, smiles politely, but it's hollow. My husband gives me a nod so faint I suspect it's more about the light hitting his sideburn than concern for me. The table across from us discusses business acquisitions, polo shirts, and golf outings. They don't include me. My fingers tighten around the menu. After salad, the hush shifts. Cressida stands with grace and announces a family tradition about the heirloom gowns. Each woman will share a dress, something passed down from their generation. They speak of heritage and legacy, something elegant, respectful. I am presented with a dress. It is cheap fabric, synthetic, rough at the seams, ill-fitting, too tight in the bust, too long in places that flap awkwardly when I move. I force a smile at its floral print, the faux pearls sewn at the neckline, the lace that pulls uncomfortably at my shoulders. Then we walk on stage, Cressida's pulses with pride. Callista whispers to Monica, "You know how she'd rather die than show her real self?" I step forward, heel clicking on the wooden riser, the overhead lights doing no favors. Midway through, the side seam rips, just a little, but enough. A thread gives way, and the back of the dress exposes skin, then lace, then a patch of flesh, an audible gasp, then laughter. Callista laughs. Some guests stare, some point. My cheeks burn hotter than the lights. I don't run. I freeze, heart folding over itself, shame blotting out every light in the room. No one comes to defend me. My husband gives me a look. He is embarrassed. His shoulders shrink. Cressida claps, urging applause for the brave tradition. Waitstaff avert eyes. Guests shift uneasily. I walk off stage with a forced smile that cracks at the edges. My hands shake. I pretend to adjust the dress, smooth a hem I can't fix. In the dim hallway behind the stage, I catch my reflection, flicker of tears, loss of dignity, but I steady myself. Because I have to. Because I promised I wouldn't be the one crying tonight. Back at my seat, I fold my hands in my lap. I stay quiet, nodding when spoken to, serving clear eyes, though I feel hollow. I remember once, before all this, I dreamt of painting full canvases again. Bright, bold colors, the smell of oil paint on my fingers. And now I paint silence. I paint fear. But I also begin to taste something else. Resolve. I try to tell myself this was a mistake. Maybe miscommunication. Maybe someone didn't know how it looked. Maybe they didn't see the pain in my face. But I know. I see the smirks behind faces, the whispered comments, Tonight was never about beauty or tradition. It was about power, about reminding me where I stand or where they think I stand. That night, I didn't cry. I packed a small bag instead. I didn't need a ride. I needed a reason to come back and not leave quietly. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for a single street lamp that flickered like it was deciding whether to stay alive. I sat on the curb beneath it, suitcase upright beside me, the leather straps of my heels biting into raw blisters. My dress, torn during the shuffle when they told me my name wasn't on the seating chart, still clung damply at my waist. The fabric smelled faintly of perfume and spilled champagne. I stared at the tinted rear window of the Montclair family SUV, waiting for a glimpse of Isolde's outline, maybe a glance that said "I see you," but no one came out. When I asked the driver for the keys, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He adjusted the brim of his cap, straightened his shoulders as though armor would make the words less cruel. "He's out," he murmured. "Mother told me not to move the car." And that was it. My ride home, my supposed place in this family, dissolved into the night like smoke. So I walked. Each step echoed louder than my pulse. My suitcase wheels snagged on cracks in the asphalt, dragging like dead weight. I passed street after street until I saw the glow of a gas station open late. Its neon sign buzzed, throwing red light across the pumps, the smell of fuel heavy in the air. I sank down onto a plastic bench under the awning, the hard suitcase pressed against my thigh. Cars passed in the distance, headlights streaking by, but none of them turned in. I checked my phone. No messages, no calls, no apology from Kevin, no whisper of concern from Isolde. Just silence. In the dark glass of the station window, I saw myself reflected back, hair fallen limp at the shoulders, makeup smeared under my eyes, my dress creased and dirty. A woman who had been erased in real time and let it happen. I stared at that reflection until I couldn't tell if it was me or a ghost of who they wanted me to become. When dawn pulled pale light over the horizon, I dragged my suitcase down 2 blocks to a low-slung motel with peeling paint. The lobby smelled of bleach and coffee gone stale. "Cheapest room," I said, voice flat. The clerk slid a key across the counter without looking at me. I paid in cash. Inside, the room was silent, heavy. I leaned against the door once it closed behind me, the suitcase braced between my knees like a shield. The silence pressed harder than the laughter from the ballroom the night before. I replayed every detail, the misprinted seating card, the rip in my dress, the way Isolde looked right through me as if I were invisible. Hours passed. The neon sign outside the window hummed, and I lay curled under the scratchy sheets, unable to sleep. Memories rose uninvited. There was a time before the gowns, before the dinners, before the Montclairs. Back then, it was just me and the smell of linseed oil, a blank canvas leaning against an easel in my rented studio. My hands spoke in color when my mouth failed me. I believed in what paint could do, make a world softer, louder, brighter, all at once. I thought of the night Kevin proposed. It was warm, crickets chirping in the garden outside my studio. He stood tall, polished, with Cressida beside him. He offered a ring engraved with his family crest, heavy and ornate. He asked me to marry him, and in the same breath asked me to give up my lease. "You can keep it," he said gently. "But your focus, it has to shift. We'll support you." I believed him. I believed them. I let the lease go. I told myself I'd keep painting in spare hours. But the canvases went into storage, the brushes stiffened with dust, invitations to exhibit dried up. Patricia's whispers reached me. "She's too soft. Not ambitious enough." Perhaps art was never her gift. And I believed that too, for a while. Now, in this motel, I reached under the mattress and pulled out the one thing I hadn't let them take: a dented sketchbook. The paper smelled of charcoal and dreams. The last pages were filled with shaky lines, aborted strokes, but at the very back, one page had only words. My handwriting, years younger, looping and certain. "You are not a guest in your own story." My fingers trembled as I traced each letter. Outside, the morning was humid, the air clinging with dew. The sign outside the window buzzed like an omen. I sat upright in bed, staring at those words. A line I had once dismissed as naive now felt like fire licking at the edges of my chest. Something stirred inside me, not just anger, but resolve. I told myself the truth I had avoided. I wouldn't just leave the wedding. I wouldn't just leave the Montclairs. I would leave the whole lie, the illusion that I belonged in a place that demanded my silence as the price of admission. So I packed, not just clothes, but the pieces of me I'd abandoned. My sketchbook, the stub of my favorite charcoal pencil, a scarf my mother once gave me. No tears this time, just hands steady, motions deliberate. I zipped the bag shut. The sound was final, like a gavel. Tonight, I promised myself, I would begin walking back toward the woman I had been before them. The one who painted in bold colors, who signed her own name at the bottom of the canvas. Not a guest, not a ghost, not invisible. And for the first time in years, that promise felt like something worth coming back for. It wasn't a conversation. It was a verdict disguised as brunch. The sun slanted through the tall windows of Callista and Kevin's estate, breaking into stripes across the cream-colored carpets and polished oak furniture. The air smelled faintly of citrus polish and magnolia blossoms brought in from the garden. I sat opposite Patricia and Monica, the two of them perfectly framed in morning light, their pearl necklaces catching sparks of gold. Tall flutes of mimosas glimmered between us. It was mid-morning, the kind of hour that should have felt soft, indulgent. Instead, the weight of what I knew pressed on my chest like a verdict already decided. I had returned to this house believing, naively, that things could shift, that if I explained myself carefully enough, if I admitted my struggles without anger, someone might see me. I folded my napkin in my lap and forced my voice steady. "I just feel out of place lately," I said quietly, though every syllable carried the tremor of truth. "I'm trying, but it's like I don't belong." Callista tilted her head, her smile thin as porcelain. "You're too sensitive sometimes, Elowen." Patricia reached for her mimosa, adjusted her pearl earrings with manicured fingers, and looked past me to the window, as though sunlight was more interesting than my presence. "Family expectations are simply part of this life," she said, tone clipped. "You signed up for more than you realize." Monica leaned in, all brightness and polish, her words rehearsed like lines in a play. "We always knew this would be difficult for you, coming from where you did. Not everyone adapts well to this." Their words landed like gavel strikes. Kevin sat beside me, silent, his phone buzzing occasionally against the table. He scrolled, his thumb moving lazily over the screen. I kept watching him, waiting for something, a squeeze of the hand under the table, a glance that said "I'm with you," but his eyes stayed on his messages. His silence was the loudest thing in the room. Later, baskets of homemade biscuits cooled on the sideboard, their buttery scent wafting through the room. I tore one in half, butter sliding into warm pools on the plate. Once, I had believed sugar and flour could heal wounds words created, that something simple could patch what people broke. But as I chewed, the taste felt hollow, as though sweetness itself had turned against me. And then, in the pause before dessert, my mind betrayed me with memory. Months earlier, I had held in my hands the letter that could have changed everything. Thick cream stationery embossed with an Italian seal. "We are pleased to inform you. Acceptance to the Florence Artist Residency." My heart had soared. I pictured myself in a sunlit studio overlooking the Tuscan hills, brush in hand, painting sunsets in colors my soul had never seen before. When I showed Kevin, his eyes lit up for a flicker of a second, then dimmed. "You can't leave now," he said gently, too gently. "We're planning the wedding." Patricia had called it a distraction. She told me my passion should serve the home, not wander across continents. And so, like a fool, I tore up that letter. I did it in front of them, the tiny shreds falling like confetti of a funeral. That day I buried my own dreams and dressed it up as loyalty. I became what they wanted, a bride, a daughter-in-law, a placeholder. Now, back at the table, I sipped honeyed mimosa. The sweetness stung. Patricia sipped hers and said with a smile that cut more than kindness, "A family supports you, Elowen, if you let us, but you're always running away, going off on your little mental journeys." Inside, something flared. I wanted to scream. I'm not running. I'm just trying to breathe. But my lips only curved into something polite, my silence feeding their illusion. I brushed crumbs from my sleeve, excused myself softly, and stepped into the garden. Outside, the air was heavy with magnolia scent. Blossoms burst white and pink against glossy green leaves. Bees drifted lazily from flower to flower. I walked past fountains where water spilled gently over carved stone, the sound steadying me. Every step loosened the noose of that dining room, even if just for a moment. I found a wrought iron bench beneath one of the magnolias. A dragonfly landed on a leaf nearby, its wings thin as glass, shimmering as it shifted in the light. For a moment, I was a child again in my mother's garden, chasing colors with my paintbrush while dragonflies darted near lilies. I missed that girl, the one who saw colors in everything, the one who believed her hands could make something beautiful out of nothing. I realized then I had swallowed too much, too many slights disguised as advice, too many verdicts disguised as brunch. When I rose from that bench, something in me had already shifted. I walked back inside, my heels clicking against marble floors. The estate's living room glowed with filtered afternoon light, drapes soft around the windows. Callista was mid-conversation with a guest about pearls and lineage, her laugh lilting, controlled. Patricia leaned back with her drink, nodding in approval. Monica smiled at every line as though applause were required. I didn't wait to be invited. I stood at the edge of the group, raised my glass, and let my voice cut through their chatter. "I want to finish my degree," I said. The words landed steady, low, unshakable. "I want my studio back. I want my art to matter, not just for show, not just for decoration, but because it is mine." The room froze. Patricia's lips tightened, her pearls glinting harsh in the light. Monica's perfect smile flickered, uncertainty showing in the corners. Kevin lowered his glass, finally looking at me, but too late. Patricia cleared her throat. "That's ambitious, dear." Callista laughed, soft and cruel. "Do you think painting pays bills in our world?" I looked toward Isolde. For the first time in months, he met my eyes. His gaze was a mixture of surprise, regret, maybe even guilt. But I didn't wait for him to stand with me. Something unspooled inside me. I didn't shout, I didn't storm out. I let silence carry my strength. "I didn't come here to be invisible anymore," I said. The afternoon light shifted, golden against the drapes, but in me there were only sharp edges. For the first time in years, I felt awake. It wasn't belonging I sought anymore. It was respect. I woke before dawn, when the house still carried the hush of secrets not yet spoken. A pale band of light slipped between the blinds, faint but insistent. The old grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly, each second echoing like a reminder that time wasn't patient forever. In the corner of the closet sat the small suitcase I had carried back from the motel. It was half unpacked, clothes spilling at odd angles, a reminder of nights when my silence had been refuge, not choice. I pulled out a simple blouse and a pair of jeans that didn't pinch, clothes that felt like mine rather than costumes for someone else's approval. When I looked in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. The bruise of yesterday's humiliation still pulsed beneath carefully applied makeup, but my spine was straight, my chin lifted. For once, I didn't want to disappear. Today wasn't about smoothing tension or avoiding whispers. Today was about boundaries. Isolde was already awake, sitting in the bedroom armchair with his shirt half-buttoned, a mug of coffee steaming in his hands. He didn't glance up as I entered, as though his silence could erase me. "You ignored me yesterday at brunch," I said, arms folding across my chest. He set the mug down. The faint clink of ceramic against wood was the only sound. His eyes flickered, conflicted. "I didn't want to make a scene." My breath caught. "Your silence was the escalation." The pause stretched. Morning sunlight glinted off the silver watch strapped to his wrist, its face polished, perfect, unbothered. He looked away and said almost softly, "They weren't attacking you." "Yes, they were," I replied, sharper now. "Every laugh, every whisper, every misprinted name. You may not hear the blade, but I feel the cut every time, and I'm done pretending otherwise." No more words followed. His silence filled the room, heavy and cowardly. I walked out, letting the air of the garden wrap around me like something closer to truth. Outside, dew clung to rose petals, their fragrance sharp in the early morning cool. Birds shifted in branches overhead. From inside the house, I caught faint notes of Cressida's laughter, the shuffle of staff in the kitchen, the sound of a world spinning as though I weren't breaking inside it. I followed a stone path lined with gardenias until I reached the oak tree, its branches blooming wide. I sat on the stone bench beneath it, feeling the chill of the rock seep into my skin. My heart wanted witness. I wanted someone besides me to feel the weight of what I carried. It wasn't long before Patricia found me. Her heels clicked softly on the stone before she appeared, smiling with that practiced kindness that always hid sharp edges. "Elowen, darling, what's all this? You look upset." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes cut. I kept my voice steady. "I need you to stop humiliating me in front of others. No more jokes about where I come from. No more reminders that I owe my place to this family." Patricia gave a thin laugh, brittle as glass. "Don't forget who you married into. We're proud of heritage here. If you want respect, you have to earn it." "Earn it?" My words cracked like a match against stone. I gave up opportunities most people only dream of, things that were mine, because of promises your family made. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Doubt, maybe, or guilt. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Her posture stiffened. "Ambition is lovely," she whispered, "but expectations are heavy. Perhaps too heavy for some." Her condescension washed over me like cold water. Anger burned, bitter and sharp, but beneath it was something harder, necessity. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to beg. I simply said, quiet but firm, "I know more than you think, and I'm not afraid to speak." The smile vanished from her lips. Her eyes narrowed, calculating. I stood and walked away, barefoot now, the grass cool beneath my feet. My heart raced, not from fear, but from clarity. This moment was when I stopped shrinking. That night, I returned to a place I had avoided since moving into the Montclair home, my old studio. Dust clung thick to the corners. Paint jars had hardened into useless clumps. Brushes were stiff as straw. A single canvas leaned behind a stack of linens, its edges cracked, its surface blank except for faint pencil outlines. I pulled it out and ran my finger across the rough weave. It hummed with unfinished possibility, with a voice that had once been mine. My hands trembled, not from hesitation, but from eagerness. I mixed what paint I could salvage, the colors sluggish but alive. Then I made the first strokes. Thin lines at first, awkward, but then surer. Each stroke sharpened something within me, carving away the years of silence. By the time I cleaned the brushes, my blouse was streaked with paint, my heartbeat steadier than it had been in months. I wasn't finished with the canvas, but I was finished with invisibility. When I returned home later, Isolde was in the living room, his posture rigid, as though waiting. Patricia lingered in the shadows of the hallway, her voice low and deliberate. "You've started something you can't take back," she said. Kevin, Isolde, stood then, his face tight. "Stop this, Elowen. If you keep acting like this, don't be surprised if you're left out of more than just brunch." I met his eyes. For a long moment, only the sound of our heartbeats filled the room. And then I answered, each word steady as steel. "They want obedience. What they're going to get is the real me." I turned away, leaving the weight of their silence behind me, and for the first time in years, my footsteps didn't echo like retreat. They sounded like arrival. Nothing scares a bully more than being seen. I studied my reflection in the visor mirror, the stoplight outside painting my bruised cheek a feverish red. The skin was tender still, a faint reminder of 6 days earlier, the breakfast confrontation where every word was meant to cut me smaller. Since then, I hadn't slept in the Montclair home. I'd slept in my studio instead, curled on a cot surrounded by the scent of drying paint, my bag always half-packed. Yet no matter how far I dragged myself, the tension clung like smoke in my clothes. Every passing glance on the street seemed to hold the question, "Why are you still here?" Today, though, I was being paraded back into their circle. Isolde drove us to the community center, his knuckles resting casually on the wheel, his silence louder than any reprimand. Patricia had called it a charity event, something to show unity, something to cleanse the air of tension, a staged reconciliation. I agreed to attend, but not because I believed in her performance. I went because I wanted to test whether there was any truth behind the mask. When I stepped out of the car, the late spring air was already warm. Volunteers in pastel shirts bustled between folding tables, arranging cupcakes and bottled water. Children darted across the grass, chasing one another with chalk-stained hands. The banner strung across the entrance read, "Together we rise." I stared at the words. That was always the promise, wasn't it? Together. But together, in this family, meant every voice but mine. I wore a modest teal dress that morning, simple, muted, something I thought would not attract attention. I wanted to blend in without being erased. Yet just as I approached the makeshift podium to prepare for my remarks, Monica brushed past me, cup in hand. A gasp, an exaggerated stumble, and hot coffee streamed down the front of my dress. She clutched her pearls, eyes widening theatrically. Oh dear, how clumsy of me! Her performance was sharp enough to sting. I stood frozen, heat seeping through the fabric, humiliation running down in dark streaks. Before I could gather myself, Patricia appeared at my elbow, the rescuer with a dagger hidden in her palm. She held out a plain canvas apron, the kind the volunteers wore. "Here, darling," she said, her tone all sugar. "Wear this. You'll blend in better." For a breath, I hesitated. The apron was coarse against my fingers, a symbol as loud as any insult. But then I reached into my clutch and pulled out my late mother's brooch, a tiny galaxy of silver stars circling a moonstone. I pinned it to the apron's neckline, letting it gleam against the rough fabric. From the crowd, I caught the eyes of an older woman I didn't know. Her expression was steady, kind. When she saw the brooch, she nodded at me, small, almost secret, but real. It steadied me. I walked to the podium. The folding chairs creaked as people shifted, waiting. I spoke of community, of service, of hope, words expected of me. But beneath them, a quiet current of rebellion threaded through every syllable. I belonged here, apron or not. Someone raised a camera, the shutter clicking. I thought I saw Patricia's mouth tighten into a glower. At the back, Kevin stood with his arms crossed, his face unreadable stone. When it was over, applause scattered through the tent, polite but uneven. I stepped down, hands trembling, not from fear, but from defiance. That night, cicadas droned outside my window, their song relentless. I sat in the bedroom alone, the memory of coffee stains still clinging to the dress draped over a chair. Isolde's voice came through the half-open door. "You overreacted," he said, tenderness worn thin like old cloth. "They invited you. Isn't that enough?" I picked up the small digital recorder I kept on my nightstand. Its light blinked faintly. My thumb brushed over the record button. "Would you wear an apron to speak at your own event if someone had humiliated you like this?" I asked. Silence. He didn't answer. His absence in that moment was louder than any denial. My mind flooded with memories. Patricia's smug remark over lunch. A wife should know her place. The dinner where I had laughed politely at her jokes, convincing myself that acceptance could be earned through silence. The endless nights I sketched until my hand cramped, hiding canvases behind closet doors so they wouldn't call my work a hobby. Every humiliation I had swallowed left a bitter film that no amount of forgiveness could wash away. This time, I didn't plan to swallow it. The next morning, I carried the recorder in my purse. It was small, unassuming, its silver mic barely visible. During event setup, I moved quietly, blending into the noise of chatter and clinking glasses. I slipped the purse onto a chair in a side room where Patricia and Monica whispered. Their voices came faint but sharp through the playback later. "Let's make her look like a server," Monica murmured. "Maybe next time she won't show her face again." A pause. Then Patricia's clipped laugh. "Perfect. Keep her busy, out of sight. She'll wear the apron and never even know the difference." My pulse hammered as I listened, each word searing proof of what I had always known but never caught. This wasn't carelessness. It wasn't misunderstanding. It was strategy. A calculated effort to erase me publicly, to make me disappear while they smiled in photographs. I pressed save on the recording, my hand steady. Then I labeled the file, tucked it into a hidden folder. One piece of evidence, real and undeniable. One file saved. A dozen more to go. You can only poke a lioness for so long before she shows her teeth. The chandeliers of the gala hall glittered like 1,000 false stars, their crystal drops scattering fractured light across tuxedos and sequined gowns. 2 weeks had passed since the charity event where Monica had poured coffee down my dress and Patricia had forced me into an apron. Tonight was supposed to be different, or at least that's what they told me. Tonight was Austin's social peak of the season, the event where whispered alliances were made, where family names gleamed like gold leaf under chandeliers. When we arrived, the valet whisked our coats away with a polite bow, the faint smell of exhaust from idling luxury cars still clinging to the air. Inside, a pianist's hands drifted across ivory keys, filling the entrance with delicate notes that barely masked the undercurrent of conversation. Everywhere, people glittered. Women in couture gowns, men with cufflinks heavy enough to pay someone's rent for a year. Patricia had insisted I wear the dress she selected. "Classic," she called it, with a smile too sharp. A sheer gown with a lace overlay, delicate embroidery tracing vines along the bodice. On the hanger it looked harmless enough, elegant even. But as I adjusted the fabric in the mirror earlier, something in me had bristled. Lace can be lovely. Lace can also be a trap. Backstage, before the presentation began, 2 assistants fluttered around me, tugging at the hem of the gown, smoothing out wrinkles. I caught their exchanged glances, nervous, almost apologetic, but neither said a word. The stage lights bled through the curtain, hot and relentless. My stomach twisted with unease, and then I stepped forward. The spotlight hit. The lace, under those blinding beams, was thinner than it had looked in any mirror. Too thin. My silhouette projected against the fabric for all to see. A gasp rustled through the audience like wind across dry leaves. Applause faltered into coughs, murmurs, muffled exclamations. I felt the collective shift, the sudden knowledge that this was not an accident. It was a setup. My eyes scanned the crowd. Monica sat near the front, her phone angled, its red light glowing like a predator's eye. Recording, of course. Patricia watched with a mask of concern that fooled no one who knew her smirk. Kevin lingered just off stage, his jaw tight, eyes burning. I swallowed the lump in my throat, lifted the microphone with steady hands, and spoke. "This dress," I said, my voice carrying across the hushed hall, "was chosen for me by my in-laws. I trusted them, like I always have. And this," I gestured to the light slicing through fabric, to the exposed silhouette, "is where that trust has gotten me." For a heartbeat, silence reigned, then gasps again. A woman in the second row turned away, shielding her child's eyes. An older man shook his head, slow and deliberate, as if marking the weight of what I'd revealed. Another woman's lips parted in recognition, as though she had endured her own version of this humiliation and understood exactly what had been done. Behind me, Kevin's voice hissed, low and venomous. "What are you doing? You're embarrassing us." I turned, the microphone still in my hand, my words amplified for every person in the hall to hear. "No," I said clearly, each syllable deliberate. "I'm embarrassing you, finally." The room erupted, not with laughter, not with scorn, but with chaos. Cameras flashed like lightning. Some applauded, tentative at first, then louder. Others murmured outrage. A woman rose from her seat and shrugged off her jacket, crossing the aisle to hand it to me. Her face was kind, her hand steady as she placed it over my shoulders. The fabric shielded me, but the moment had already been burned into every camera, every whisper. Security moved quickly, pulling Monica aside, telling her she had no authorization to film. But we all knew the recording would surface. Recordings always did, and that was fine. Let it. The humiliation they designed was about to become my weapon. By the time we returned home, headlines were already hitting the wires. Billionaire's daughter-in-law calls out family abuse at gala. Socialite turns stage into confession booth. She spoke truth in lace. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through article after article. Some voices online praised me, calling me brave, fierce, a lioness. Others spat venom. Attention seeker, ungrateful wife, disgrace. The duality of it should have broken me. Instead, I breathed it in like oxygen. I was no longer invisible. For the first time, people saw what had been done in shadows. Downstairs, Patricia's voice slithered through the hall. "You've made this a spectacle," she hissed, standing just inside the foyer. I met her glare without flinching. "Spectacles are for those who hide in the dark," I said evenly. "I thrive in the light." Isolde lingered near the staircase, smaller than I had ever seen him under the glow of the chandelier. Shame and fury warred across his face, but he didn't speak. Perhaps he finally realized silence no longer belonged to him. The next morning, I sat by the kitchen window with my coffee. The sun poured across the magnolia trees outside, their blossoms heavy with scent. I scrolled through the buzzing tide of social media, thousands of strangers debating me, dissecting me, seeing me. It wasn't all kind, but it was undeniable. I looked down at my hands, fingers curled around the mug. The same hands that once painted colors into canvas, that once signed contracts erased by others, that once folded in silence at Patricia's table. These hands now held something else. Evidence, defiance, truth. The dress, the stage, the cameras. They had wanted to humiliate me. Instead, they handed me the record I needed. Proof. And just like that, I wasn't invisible anymore. When abusers realize they've lost control, they don't retreat, they escalate. The morning light filtered through blinds as I checked my phone. Notifications, alerts, messages from people I didn't even know, but all pointing to the same thing, a video edited to paint me as unstable. Patricia had done it. Monica had shared it. Kevin liked one comment. "She's been struggling mentally for years." My chest tightened. Breakfast smelled like burnt toast and coffee. Isolde poured milk into his cup, his face pale. I stood still, drinking water. "You saw them going after me?" I asked. He glanced up. "I saw some things, people talking." "Because you let it happen," I said quietly. He didn't answer. Later, I called Patricia. "For family's sake, can we talk?" "Privately," I said, voice controlled. She laughed lightly on the phone. "Of course, a mother just wants peace, right?" I agreed, though every instinct warned me. I drove to her house that afternoon, windows cracked open so I could hear the wind. I carried something hidden in my necklace, a recording mic, small and shallow, almost invisible. Inside, the living room was grand. Velvet drapes, polished wood, sunlight falling in beams across ornate chairs. We sat. Patricia made tea in delicate porcelain. She poured me a cup. "I just want you to understand I'm hurt. I didn't deserve all of this," I said. She smiled, sweetness masking something cold. "Darling, nobody's perfect. You're married into a high profile. It comes with expectations." Patricia leaned forward. "Maybe if you weren't so sensitive, more people would see you as strong instead of weak." Monica beside her smirked. "Yes, always this drama. We did tell you that maybe you're not cut out for this world." Then the trap widened. Patricia's eyes darted. "You know, Kevin always worries how you'll handle criticism. I worry for our public image. Gossip spreads fast." I sat silent, letting their words land. Monica admitted subtly. "We had to push the narrative. People need a story, and a villain is always more interesting." My throat jerked. Their voices, once muffled in rumors, now declared truths they didn't own, their plan exposed. I left quietly, the mic still tucked against my chest. By dusk, I was in my lawyer's office, laying down the recorder on his desk. "Everything's on tape," I said. He pressed play. Voices flat, cruel, confident. I sat, listening to them describe me as unstable, ungrateful, a piece in their performance. The lawyer nodded. "You've built a case. You need to move fast. By the time they realize, it'll be too late." I signed papers for defamation, harassment, emotional abuse. My hand didn't shake. Not tonight. Later that evening, I walked outside onto the balcony of my apartment. The city lights blinked below. I thought of being hidden for so long, behind appearances, behind prioritizing kindness, behind making excuses for those I loved. A text from a friend appeared. "Saw the video? I believe you. Not everyone is loud enough to fight back, but you are." My heart grew steady. The war they started was about to be televised. They thought they were the producers of my shame. I turned them into the stars of their own downfall. A week after I handed over the recordings to the press, the voices of Patricia and Monica plotting to humiliate me, I found myself walking up Vanderbilt Street, the wide avenue lined with limousines and shutter-clicking cameras. The spring air smelled of orchids, sharp perfume, and the metallic tang of anticipation. The kind of night when people's smiles were rehearsed and their jewelry glittered just a shade too bright. I wore a black wrap dress, simple and elegant, one that spoke with authority without needing sequins or a plunging neckline to earn attention. My heels clicked against the cobblestones with each step. The brooch pinned at my collar, my mother's silver crescent studded with tiny stars, rested cool against my chest, a quiet reminder that I carried truth with me. Inside the marquee, chandeliers hung low, casting soft golden halos over tables draped in ivory linen. Glasses clinked. Waiters moved like shadows, balancing trays of wine and oysters. Austin's elite floated between conversations, their laughter light, but layered with calculation. Mothers wrapped in pearls, men adjusting cufflinks, eyes scanning the room for someone more powerful to impress. At the far end, I saw Monica fussing over Patricia's gown, smoothing satin over her shoulders, whispering something sharp behind her fan. Patricia's smile was fixed, her laughter chimed too perfectly. Kevin, notably, was absent, his empty chair already drawing whispers. I kept moving, weaving through clusters of polite conversation. The fundraiser was Patricia's masterpiece, her grand stage to remind the city how flawless she was, how indispensable her family's name remained. And I, for too long, had been her unwilling prop. Tonight, I was no longer part of her scenery. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. A breaking headline flashed across the screen. Patricia Langford's confession video goes viral. Charity sponsors pull out. Beneath it, another. Wealthy family caught abusing daughter-in-law. The comments scrolled like a tide. Some sympathetic, others brutal, but all undeniable. Finally, someone tells the truth. She deserves better. Monsters hiding behind chandeliers. I tucked the phone away. My pulse slowed. This wasn't revenge. It was revelation. I stepped into the garden for air. Lanterns swayed overhead, strung across branches, glowing like fireflies against twilight. Staff bustled nearby, passing drinks, wiping sweat from brows, murmuring to one another. They glanced at me, some lowering their eyes, but one woman offered a small nod, as if to say, "We saw what you did, and we believe you." Back inside, the hum rose as Patricia mounted the stage. Her satin gown shimmered under the lights, each jewel catching and reflecting the glow like stars desperate to burn. She gripped the podium, lips curved in a smile polished by years of rehearsal. "Good evening, friends," she began, her voice lilting, warm. "It brings me immense joy to see our community gathered for such an important cause." Applause swelled. Cameras clicked. The spotlight found her face. For a moment, she looked untouchable, and then it broke. Two detectives in dark suits emerged from the back of the hall, weaving between tables with quiet authority. Their presence sliced through the applause. Murmurs rippled. A man coughed. A woman shifted in her chair, pearl necklace trembling against her collarbone. The taller detective raised his voice, firm and unyielding. Patricia Langford, you are under arrest for conspiracy, harassment, and defamation. The words echoed through the hall like a gavel cracking wood. The silence that followed was deafening. Champagne flutes trembled on tables. Monica's face drained of color. She stumbled backward, pressing a hand to her mouth. Someone dropped their fork. It clattered loudly, indecently loud in the stillness. Patricia froze. Her bracelets clinked faintly as her hands shook. The mask cracked. Her smile faltered. She turned her head, scanning the room, until her gaze locked on me. For a long moment, we simply stared at each other across the distance. "This dress," she muttered under her breath, her microphone catching the tremor. "This dress was supposed to be perfect." The irony twisted sharp. The officers stepped forward. One gently but firmly took her arm, the other reading her rights as the crowd looked on. Flashbulbs popped like gunfire. Guests whispered in horrified fascination. Patricia's face crumpled under the lights. When they clicked the cuffs around her wrists, the gasp from the room was nearly physical, like a wave crashing against glass. As they led her down the aisle between tables, heads turned. Some guests hid their eyes, others drank in every detail. Monica tried to follow, but security barred her path. Patricia, regal no longer, was swallowed by the clicking of cameras. I moved forward then, not hurried, not triumphant, steady. My heels clicked softly against the polished floor. When I reached the stage, the microphone still stood, abandoned mid-speech. I gripped it with calm hands. The hush was absolute. "I just wanted to thank Patricia," I said, voice steady, deliberate, amplified for every ear in the room, for finally showing everyone who she really is. A collective intake of breath swept the hall. Some faces were shocked, others approving. A few people nodded slowly, knowingly. In the back, I saw a woman wiping away tears. I stepped back from the podium, let the silence hang, and then left the stage. Later that night, as twilight gave way to darkness, a message arrived on my phone. It was from Kevin, but delivered through his lawyer. The words were clinical, sharp, accusations of emotional distress, defamation, reputation damage. He wanted to sue me. He wanted to claw back dignity through paperwork. I sat in my apartment, reading the letter under the glow of a single lamp. My lips curved, not in cruelty, but in recognition. Because I already held something no lawsuit could erase. That sealed envelope my father had given me, the one they thought vanished after the funeral, still rested in my drawer. Contracts, signatures, original documents. Proof not only of what I had endured, but of what they had stolen. It was the blade they feared most. They thought tonight was Patricia's grand stage. They thought I would be shamed into silence once again. Instead, I turned their spotlight into a mirror, and for the first time, the world saw them clearly. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like a locked door that will never open again. The envelope felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. The edges were yellowed, crisp with age, the ink slightly faded but still sharp enough to cut. My father's hand had sealed it long before his death, trusting that one day I would be strong enough to open it, read it, and act on what was inside. That day had come. Inside were property deeds, notarized transfers, business shares, all signed and witnessed, each line a fortress against the lies I had been fed. I sat in the sterile glow of the downtown legal office as the clerk slid the final file across to me. A single stroke of the pen removed Isolde's name from documents I once believed defined my marriage, my worth, even my future. His titles, his access, his supposed authority, all gone. The prenuptial clause I once skimmed without a second thought was suddenly my shield. I had been too naive to recognize its weight then, but my father had insisted it be drafted tightly. The language was clear. Any proven misconduct, any abuse, any accusation substantiated by evidence would nullify inheritance rights entirely. The judge didn't even hesitate. Misconduct had been proven in public and in court. Isolde's fortune dissolved like sugar in water. The gavel didn't roar. The clerk didn't shout. It was quiet, an erasure in black ink. Justice delivered in silence. While my world began to steady, theirs collapsed. Monica's name burned across headlines. Influencer in ruins? Clips of her stammering through a live stream apology were dissected on talk shows. I watched her wide eyes and trembling lips, how she tried to smile through the unraveling, her voice rehearsed but hollow. In another life, I might have felt pity, but not now, not after she made my humiliation her hobby. The public didn't buy her tears. Comments scrolled fast as wildfire. Stop playing the victim. We saw the footage. No brand should ever work with her again. Sponsors withdrew overnight. Contracts vanished. Tax documents leaked. Behind the filtered Instagram photos of brunches and designer bags, Monica was forced to pick up extra shifts at a cafe tucked into the corner of a strip mall. A friend whispered to me once that she cried in the restroom between orders, muttering, "I never thought it would come to this." But the damage was permanent. Patricia's downfall was even more public. A week later, I drove to the mall where she had been assigned community service. The summer sun beat down on the parking lot, reflecting sharp light off glass storefronts. Families streamed in and out, children tugging at parents' hands, laughter echoing. And there she was, the woman who once dictated my every move, stooped over, sweeping the sidewalk. Her manicured hands were hidden inside rubber gloves now stained with grime. Her satin gowns were replaced by an orange vest, dust clinging to her arms. She glanced up when I approached, her expression flickering. Surprise, then shame, then something dangerously close to regret. I held out a bottle of water, condensation dripping onto my fingers. "I forgive you," I said quietly, my voice steady as stone. "But I will never forget." She opened her mouth as if to respond, but no words came. Her throat worked. Her eyes dropped to the concrete. I didn't wait. I turned and walked away, the sun warm on my back. I didn't need her apology to survive. At home, the quiet had changed. It wasn't the brittle silence of tension anymore, or the hollow quiet of shame. It was gentle now, filled with possibility. Light spilled through linen drapes in golden streaks across the floorboards. The house smelled of coffee and fresh paint. In the mornings, I sat at my desk with a brush in hand, sketching again, lines and colors spilling from me like water from a long clogged well. My father came by often. Together we worked in the garden, kneeling in the soil as we planted lavender and rosemary along the back porch. His stories drifted through the air like pollen, memories of his own battles, mistakes, victories I had never asked about before. I listened now. His voice carried a weight that steadied me. Therapy became another kind of garden. I sat in a room with white walls and soft chairs, and for the first time in years, I spoke aloud truths I had buried, the shame, the anger, the humiliation of being made invisible. I didn't whisper them like confessions. I stated them like facts, letting them exist outside my chest. Each word became a brick in the foundation of my strength. I am not what they said I was, I told myself. I am not the weak thing they painted me as. I am not erased. There were still nights I questioned. Lying awake, I asked myself, did I go too far? Did I destroy people who once thought they loved me? But every time, the answer returned. Love cannot thrive where betrayal blooms. The final thread snapped in a lawyer's office. I met Kevin there, seated across a polished mahogany table. He looked smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched, his eyes flat, his mouth pressed into a bitter line. He didn't speak, not even when the lawyer slid the final divorce papers toward us. No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence, the same silence he once used as a weapon. I picked up the pen. My signature flowed across the page, clear and sharp. I had once kept quiet where I should have signed my name. This time, I signed without hesitation, and I stood, leaving the silence behind me. Life didn't end there. It began. Today, I spend one day a week at the art center, kneeling beside children with wide eyes and paint-streaked hands. I show them how to mix colors, how to trust their brushstrokes. I teach them that a line drawn in courage will always speak louder than silence. Their laughter fills the halls, and I feel something heal inside me each time they smile at their own creations. Out in the yard, the lavender my father planted blooms now, purple, fragrant, defiant. It grows tall, strong, rooted, just like me. They stripped me of everything once, my dignity, my voice, my seat at the table. They left me bruised and empty, convinced I was nothing without their approval. But they forgot something vital. I was never built from the gowns I wore or the roles they assigned me. I was built from every scar, every silence I carried, and every choice I made to stand again. And now, when I breathe in the lavender air of my own garden, I know this. I wasn't erased. I was reborn. Sometimes, the greatest power isn't revenge. It's reclaiming your voice after years of being silenced. Elowen's story reminds us that silence can protect abusers, but truth exposes them. Have you ever felt trapped by a family that wore smiles in public but wielded cruelty in private? If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below and share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true, powerful stories like this one.